Hi, it's George. I am back from my Pennsylvania trip, and of course, I am KTC along with my team. It was an insightful trip. I went to see a whole bunch of clients, and all of them at different stages in their business. Some with, I guess with all of them with huge opportunities, just different opportunities. So it was fascinating to spend time with them. And the cool thing was this time I didn't book a specified number of days. I left some days open so I could add days as required or subtract days, depending on the needs. So that was something that I've learned, is to not have a fixed timeline, allow for a little bit of flexibility.
Cool. And so for today's episode, we're going to talk about the turnkey business journey. And so it would be great, I think, for all of our listeners to have you take us back to what it was like being stuck in the day-to-day of your business, all the way to, implementing these turnkey processes that you've been able to leverage so that your business runs on its own. And so the first thing maybe that I want to ask you is if you could take us back to what it was like being stuck in your landscape business, stuck in the day-to-day, frustrated as hell, dealing with client complaints, wanting a way out. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so it was really painful, to be honest with you. I think it's funny because the reason I made the changes that I did were through necessity. I just couldn't handle the stress anymore, and I realized that somebody had to be what I would call the chief improvement officer in the business, only focused on process solutions, and the reason for that is then I'd have a high focus on results that would be transferable to the rest of the team. And so I removed myself literally from the day-to-day. I didn't go on sales calls, pretty much none of that. And I focused on getting better. And one process at a time, thousands of processes later, our business is pretty dialed in. It is pretty much turnkey. And I can say that with complete confidence because here's some facts. The business can run without me. The leaders there know what to do and when to do it. They can set budgets. They can follow budgets. They can run all the meetings. They can hire. They can fire. Everything happens without us. And that's pretty cool. And so that can't happen unless you create a turnkey system for your business. And of course, the fact of the matter is you got to have some amazing people too. So you have to have people that are open to change, number one, and you have to have great leaders. And I think great managers are super important at every level, from the production level, people producing the work, right up to the mid-level management, right up to the senior management. You have to have great managers, and they're not that common. So, if you have the wrong person in that chair that's running the business, you will at best idle, at worst you will start to flounder. So it's all about getting the right people. And, yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. The companies that are successful have absolute A teams, and you can't do it with a B team. Anybody that tells you that you can just have a great process and have great results, forget about it. You got to have people that worry about your business for you, and they're not that common. They're out there, and again, it's a race for talent.
And can you take us back to, was it around 2020 when you were still stuck in the day-to-day, or around when was that?
Yeah, 2020 is when I made the conscious choice to no longer be involved in the day-to-day whatsoever, and I focused on just making the business better, essentially. We moved to the cloud completely. That was a huge help. That allows us to organize properly and be able to reach everybody in the company at every corner of the company in the most efficient way. We could have meetings virtually. We could have meetings in person, and it literally took me stepping away and then empowering others. And the way they were empowered is A, I had the right people. B, I gave them great processes that they were part of producing. So it wasn't my siloed efforts to change the business. It was a group effort to what process is going to work? Does this make sense? A lot of interruptions during that period, to try and regain, the flow of information. So it wasn't, all about me. It became we. And that was, I think, tough on everybody. The good news is now that we've set it up, it's repeatable. We can take the same process and just implement it somewhere else. So, creating the process and running the business at the same time are 4 full-time jobs.
And so it sounds like there was a kind of inflection point where, like after that moment, like things really started to transform rapidly. And so can you take us like to what your life was like just before that inflection point? What is maybe like, is there a story or is there something that happened where you realize like, I can't keep on doing things like the way I have been for like 35 years?
Yeah, so I think we kept dropping the ball and different balls in different places. And I'm like, unless I figure out a way to not drop the ball, this is going to be an ongoing process. And, chief firefighter is going to be here to save the day. And after a while, that gets exhausting. So really, we literally went through all of our biggest problems, and then we organized lists of like what we do first through meeting structures to make sure that those problems didn't happen again. And so, one of them was a design checklist, making sure that our designs went through every single possibility that could go wrong from the municipal bylaw standards. An absolute nightmare. And then we went through failure checkpoints, like why is this thing going to fail from a construction standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, from a, when we talk about environment, we talk about wind, we talk about water, we talk about noise, we talk about different types of soil. So where's the failure going to happen and how do we mitigate that? Because every time we make a mistake, we pay for it 2 or 3 times. And so the trick really is to eliminate the mistakes. And so the processes are there to keep guardrails in place so that we don't screw up. That's the first thing. Don't screw up. And you have to have a process for that. It has to be a certain way, certain steps. It's like a pilot checks with his co-pilot to make sure, the fuel, the flaps, everything works before they take off. And so, it's tough flying a plane that keeps crashing and, somehow you manage to survive. So, you make some profits and all that stuff, but what's the point if you're constantly exhausted, from the repeatable, avoidable, issues that you yourself are creating because of a lack of process.
Mm-hmm. So you felt like you kept falling into the same hole repeatedly, year after year, season after season.
Yeah, so it's either a process problem or a people problem, and we had good people, so therefore it could only be process. Like at the end of the day, we didn't have bad people, so it was purely process problems. And so once we dialed in on those processes to prevent bad things from happening, things changed. And once we created those meeting structures with the flow efficiency meetings, with the agendas, with the lists, in the order that everything's in a specific order, repeatable, the business started just running beautifully. And I was able to step away and the business ran better without me, which is incredible. It's ironic that the owner of the business isn't necessarily the best manager. And so imagine you have people that embrace this process and they double down on it. You're going to get some great results. And so, it's great. I get my dividend checks and I don't have to go out there and deal with Mrs. Smith talking about our tulips and fence boards that are falling off and the windstorm that snapped their trees in half. That was all fun for the first 35 years. And so it's really liberating now to work on improvements. I just work on efficiency and improvements and leadership training, which is a big part of it.
And I'm wondering, you're a pretty objective guy as a business owner. I'm wondering if there's kind of any subjective moments that come to mind that led to this change. Like, was there a specific client that you were dealing with where maybe you dropped the ball and you were like, this is it. Like, I've had enough.
Yeah, so there was 2 clients actually. One was a woman who was incredibly high level woman. This woman was top shelf. Nothing would get by her. And we just weren't good enough to live up to her expectations. So that was interesting. And I realized it was all process problems. Anyway, we got through, we had a happy client. They hired us back a year later for more work. I realized that if we had the processes dialed in and we would have herded the sheep, so to speak, we wouldn't be running around chasing things. And so it had to be on our terms. And that's part of the process, setting up things so that people work on your terms. We had another client that just kept moving the goalpost for us. Actually, we had 2 clients that did that. And that was exhausting to try and keep up with the constant changes. It shows you if you don't have a great process and you can't keep up with people like that change their minds all the time, you're probably not good enough. And so it really tests you. The easy clients are a breeze. They're not all going to be easy. It's when you get the hard ones and you treat them well and you get out of it unscathed. That's when, that's the true proof of how well your processes are working.
So that's great. And it sounds like, based on that, you can kind of identify with how it's like for a lot of other business owners to struggle. Like, it sounds like what you were going through was actually not so much the exception, it was more like the rule.
Yeah, I consider myself extremely organized, extremely on point. The difference is that I can't be everywhere to manage everything. So I realized what I could do is make processes that are great for everyone and get their input into those processes. And I think that was the game changer, to be honest with you, is to identify these processes that are just repeatable and scalable, and then have people follow in the slipstream. We do onboarding now, and the onboarding is job shadowing. Like, you job shadow the best people for sometimes 2 or 3 months. Yes, it costs a lot of money. You'll find out very quickly if the person can keep up, whether they're jumping ahead of the game or not. Job shadowing is so important. Yes, it costs money. It's way cheaper than just throwing somebody into the fire and saying good luck. That is very stressful for them. And I've been put in that position when I've worked for other companies in a consulting kind of mode. And you figure it out. You learn a lot of things. It's not the culture you want to be in, though. That's for sure.
And what kind of culture do you want to be in?
I want to be shown how to do things. I want to have predictability. I want to have an understanding of what my peers are doing. I want to understand if there's a conflict, how it gets resolved in advance rather than through friction. And so those things make for great culture. And so, business isn't easy at the best of times. Imagine if you have poor people and poor process in place, and even worse, poor culture. So that's something that you can feel a good culture. It is so uncommon to have great cultures in business. And when you see it, it's something else. Oftentimes, I've yet to see a good culture where you have owners that have arrogance and hubris. Usually it's a toxic culture. They can make a lot of money for sure, but man, is there a lot of grief and stress and turnover and unhappy employees. And so if your only goal is to make money, you can be ruthless, and I've seen that work. I see the collateral damage, the turnover, the lawsuits, the divorces, the fights between the business owners and partners sometimes. It is just ugly. And so, making money is super important. So is having a good time. And they're not mutually exclusive. The trick is to get them to work together.
Okay. Yeah. And so it sounds like it's just not a good long-term strategy then.
In terms of?
Well, just in terms of, like having the ruthless mindset.
Yeah. So, it's a lot better to live in, North America than Russia. Let's just put it that way.
And so, for business owners wanting to set up a good culture, a good culture is so uncommon, right?
Correct.
And so how is it that they would even start? Like, it sounds like in your journey, it was super difficult. There was a lot of friction that was involved with this transformation to building this turnkey business. So how is it that someone would actually go about even starting properly?
Yeah. So there's two parts to it. One is look at yourself. Like, who am I? What makes me tick? I think the Myers-Briggs is a phenomenal tool for that. And you can look that up on Indeed, actually, where you can get a free assessment link and find out who you are, and then really understand who am I. Part of it's education, so learning your blind spots. So, if you didn't go to business school, even then, there's people with huge blind spots that have gone to business school. A business education in 2 or 3 days can make a huge difference. What don't I know that I should know? And then, of course, people, culture, process, right? So if I've got great people, how do I get the process dialed in? And that's Kaizen, the philosophy of continual improvement. So if you've got 1,000 problems, and believe me, if we sat down and we just started listing problems, it would be unbelievable. If we started categorizing them by the 5 pillars of business: economics, money, insurance, law, technology, human resources, operations, and sales and marketing, it's unbelievable how many problems there are. What you got to do is prioritize them in those columns and then pick 3, not across all of them, your top 3, and then resolve them. And that's how you start getting better. So it's one step at a time, and it's a process, right? It takes time. It's not like you're going to be better like that. It's going to take a few years. So for those of you, yes, you can solve some problems really quick. You can free up money. You can do things like that. But to actually make your business where, like, man, it's fun to go to work, that's at least 5 years. And that's with somebody at the helm that knows what they're doing. Otherwise, you're just floundering.
Okay, so there's a lot that would be needed. First, it's like understanding yourself. Second, it's understanding all the priorities that are required to make your business better. Then it's focusing only on the most urgent priorities. And then it's a matter of having the patience.
And I think the other thing too is understanding financials, like understanding how important financials are, and where the money's going. So, I'm always amazed. I ask the question, what's the difference between an income statement and a balance sheet? And most people cannot articulate it cleanly. And I argue that most people don't even look at their balance sheets, and they never have. So it's something where you can sit down with someone who actually knows their stuff, and they can walk through your assets and your liabilities to tell you what kind of quality there is there, how much trouble there is there, and then to look at your equity to see whether you're actually building equity year over year. So most people don't build equity. They literally take all their profits, reinvest in the business, and make the business no more valuable. So the whole point is to build goodwill in your business. And, most people aren't doing that because they're overspending. So, in Kaizen, there's the 10 types of waste. And the 2 biggest sins, in my view, are defects and overspending. And so that's the first thing we focus on, is eliminating problems and then eliminating overspending. The sum of your overspending over time is typically millions of dollars. And so what do I actually need to spend money on? What are my needs versus my wants? It is so important to make that distinction. A lot of owners have a real tough time with that one. They like to mix pleasure with business. Business is business, pleasure is pleasure. One is a means to the other end. So the business is a means to a wonderful life. And, I don't like to have the fancy car in my business. That's something that we can do after we've got a great balance sheet and we reduced our debt to nearly nothing.
So how much does operating based on clear core principles come into this equation?
Yeah. So imagine you knew where you knew where you're going. You knew exactly what you needed to do. You knew the how and the why and the when and the who. If you had all that sorted out, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just shooting blind is very ineffective, and shooting all over the place blind. At least if you have a target, you're playing darts, chances are you'll hit the bullseye eventually. So you got to focus what you're looking to achieve. Sometimes people spread themselves too thin. They have no ability to manage their time. There are so many thieves of time and money that you can really dial in. For those of you that are not organized, this will be way more difficult. The beauty of having a team is if you've got somebody who's organized who can help you, that'll be very, very helpful. So the companies that are so far the best company I've seen, it has the greatest leadership, the best management, is the most organized, and invests in leadership, not just for themselves, but for their entire team. And they do not settle for mediocrity. So it's really, and they're crafty. They use their craftiness too. So it's not like it's all strategic. Some of it's tactical. And they just do this over and over. And I've been watching them for probably about 10 years now get to the level they're at. It's just so impressive. And they've got all the cylinders of the car running beautifully. There's no misfiring. It works beautifully. And, they double down on sales and every part of their business to make sure that they're closing deals and hitting their targets and hitting their profit margins and having low turnover and rewarding their staff and having the best equipment. And, it's just beautiful to see. And it's totally possible. And anybody that tells you that an average person can do it is woefully wrong. It takes an exceptional person to do it with exceptional dedication to improvement. So, you can't just jump into a great system and all of a sudden things are going to work. There has to be still a great leader there to drive the machine forward.
And it took you about 3 years, is that right? To actually implement this turnkey business where you're able to step away?
Yeah. So actually, I'd say it took me about 10,000 hours of working on process. And then the magic sauce was the meeting systems that we created that essentially I just stopped going to meetings and the company ran without me. No one asked me to do anything anymore. It was all automated. Everything's automated. The team would rally around the agenda and just knock off the items as a group. No friction, understanding who's going to give a little bit, who's going to take a little more, without it being a me mentality. So it became a we mentality, and that's just a way more fun place to work. It's interesting. One of the things I have a pet peeve, so it's a little bit with accountants. They're always like, we need your historical data. So my analogy to you would be is if you had a business and you were playing in a league and you had all losses. And I said to you, forget your losses. Forget about the old 2024, 23, 22. All that's irrelevant. 2025, we're going to implement a new plan, including new financials, and we're going to move forward and we're going to start to score and we're going to start to win. That is a much better approach than rejigging and looking at old numbers that don't actually mean anything. So, it's like you had a car accident and you move on. You get a new car and you move on. And so, accountants are stuck in the past. It's like essentially looking at data that's already happened. We're going to create new data. And so I oftentimes have friction with accountants that want to preserve old financials, especially for smaller companies that the data really means nothing.
And so it sounds like it's a tough journey to actually develop this turnkey business. And you were able to do it relatively quickly, like in a span of
I would say
3 years.
slowly. I would say, we've been in business almost 40 years, and I would say, we did a lot of learning through mistakes, which is completely avoidable. And then we started doing a lot of learning through doing things right. And the cost of that change was expensive. So imagine all our money's going into process development, paying me to work on not selling customers, but making the business better. That's expensive. Once that's done, I don't need to be in the business anymore. So I'm no longer part of the overhead. Things just run well. And then it's tweaks. You're tweaking things. You're not doing absolute full on, lobotomies on your business. And so, I would say a business, if done right, if you could start, like if you're starting a new business and you did this right, you would save yourself 20 years, 25 years for sure. And the chances of success would go up exponentially. And so we've got a few clients that are avoiding mistakes. They're paying us to avoid mistakes. And, it's a game changer. It really is. So even on things like I'm building this retaining wall and I'm worried about this. Well, we can give you all the construction solutions as well. We've built pretty much everything at Oriole Landscaping, including our solid space construction for home construction, underpinning, all that stuff. So, if you're doing an estimate, you're not sure what the number should be and you're completely, out of your game, something you've never done before. We've got the team. I often refer to, my general manager or some of my project managers to ask them for advice on some specific project, because I've been in the construction for a few years. But what a difference that makes to not make that mistake in the construction phase. So how many of you make mistakes on estimating? So that's something I think that's the biggest opportunity, is to get your estimating right. If you get that right, you're going to make way fewer mistakes. Of course, you got to learn to worry about the people and collecting the money and all that stuff, but at least get the job done right and make sure that the amount of time that you've allocated is correct. So that's the biggest thing. If you can get that right, you're halfway there. That's for sure.
Okay, so maybe what was quick was, because I'm trying to piece this together, because there's a sense in which your transition to a turnkey business was really fast, but there's also a sense in which it was really slow. It was really slow because, there's just this 35 years of kind of like business experience that you were gaining. You were building the team, right? You were learning, how to run a business. You were building processes slowly. You'd implemented Kaizen maybe 10 years prior to, really starting the turnkey journey. But yeah, so you have all that background experience. But then there seems to have been something where, like, from 2020 to 2023, you had this kind of like, I don't know, this epiphany where you were like, oh my God, I can get myself out of the business. I don't need to
Well,
work in it
I
anymore.
actually did the math. I did
Yeah.
the math. I'm like, okay, how many mistakes are we making this year? And what does that cost? Okay. So what if my only focus was to prevent the mistakes? What would that be? And it exceeded my salary. And so if I know what I knew now and I started, I would have saved millions of dollars. So, who's the chief improvement officer? It's interesting. One company I'm working with, they're probably about 13, 14 million in the US. And we have strategic planning, and then there's some tactical emergency. So we have to pivot because we have to deal with that fire right away before we go back to strategy. And that's when I realized, you know what? My solution to this is very simple. Rather than booking three days, I'm going to book 5 days. I'm going to keep it open, and I'll fly back early if there's nothing to do. That way I can deal with the tactical and complete the strategic. So imagine I don't have a fixed timeline now for improvement. I can ebb and flow, right? So that's a great way to look at some, solution to a problem. And the client has to be open enough to having a bigger bill. Having said that, they're going to resolve some issues. And if I put $1 to the savings, it's, usually 10 to 1 at least, because some of the problems perpetuate themselves year after year after year. So it's like, let's shut the problem down once and for all. How do we do that? And I think that's a big game changer. So, most companies just either don't have the bandwidth or the experience or the knowledge to actually resolve the issues themselves, and they don't have the experience to know what to do. And, I think Justin from JC Landscaping, he's probably the epitome of, the coach guy. He hires so many coaches. It's unbelievable. A sales coach, a marketing coach, a Kaizen coach like myself, financial, like the guy is so open-minded and investing in knowledge and process, and then actually implementing the things that he learns. It's incredible. For those of you that are just going to do trial and error and try and get lucky, it doesn't work very well that way. It's going to take you forever. And, really for me, the big change, if I was to sum it up, the biggest change ever was learning about the concept of flow efficiency. And it's one of the principles of Kaizen, and it absolutely changed my world. So that's why I like to get my hands dirty, go in to visit clients one-on-one, solve the problems once and for all, and move on to the next problem. And, it's definitely the way to go.
And what I'm hearing in this is there's transitions between stages of business. And what can happen for a lot of business owners is they get stuck in a certain stage and then they can't move on to the next one. It kind of sounds like that's where you were, 35 years stuck in the day-to-day. And then you're like, wait a minute, it's possible for me to transition to this next stage of business. And you were actually able to do it. And it sounds like, a lot of business owners out there, they're stuck at a stage and they might have been stuck there for 10
Right.
years. And, they might not know how to get out of it on their own.
Yeah. So part of it is, most people don't look at their profit and loss statements either. So if I had profits, what am I going to invest it in? Is it a Bobcat? Is it a consultant? Is it a machine? Is it some software? Is it a person? And guess what? You're gonna have to invest in people. Like, you're gonna have to take a risk, and that first person that you hire in the office is, stressful. It's like, this money is gonna leave the business. If you don't do it, you cannot grow. So at some point, part of the reason for profit is if you put some of it aside, you can use it to reinvest in your business. And it can be tangible things like a Bobcat or a building, or it can be a person. And so the best companies literally build the best teams. And, that would be, for example, somebody like a sales designer who's amazing with people, fantastic at design, and they're game changers in the closing rates. Marketing's great, but if you can't close a deal, what's the point of the exercise? And so, I think we under-recognize how important great people are. And so, we're fortunate. We've got some great people. We went through some not so great people for sure, and we held on to them too long. There are companies that I coach still that have people that still are there that shouldn't be there, and they're holding up the opportunities for other amazing employees to join that team. And it also doesn't send a message, it doesn't send a message like, hey, our leaders are looking after the tribe. And so that's painful, unfortunately. So the companies will be held back by those people that are not contributing to the team.
Yeah. So it's not possible to move to the next stage of business with a bad team.
Well, you got to get rid of your baggage. Like you got to get rid of your baggage. You cannot move forward extra baggage. It's just too hard. It's like going through the desert with not enough water and a ton of baggage, and you want to save everything.
Yeah, with people that are trying to take your water.
People are trying. They're trying to take your water.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And so you had this transition between stages. It took about 3 years, right? 2020 to 2023.
Well, so we had the people in place. We didn't have the processes.
Right.
So we actually had the people. We didn't have the processes. It wasn't until we got the process in place that things started to run really, really well. I mean, we were better run than most companies. But I mean, if you look at a business like a car and every single cylinder has to run perfectly. So you have, let's say, an 8-cylinder engine and, the first 5 cylinders are working really well, but the 6th one's not. It's going to cause problems. And so you might have to stop the car because the car overheats, all that stuff. So unless all your cylinders are firing beautifully in sequence, you're going to have mistiming and it's going to be a very ugly ride. So you've got to get every cylinder of your business dialed in for it to run well. So it's tough because, there are 1,200 accountabilities in every business. And so I've mapped it out. I've actually mapped out every single folder and file that's required to run a business. And there are 1,200 of them. So if you're, 2 or 3 people in management, that is an insane amount of stuff to manage. And some of it's time sensitive. So, building a great team. So people, the other thing that's interesting. So there's companies that, they work 3,000 hours a year. No word of a lie. They work 3,000 hours a year. And they say, well, look how much money I'm making. Well, look how much you're working. So that's great. Continue to do that. I have no issues with that. Is it sustainable? For most companies, it's not. And, life changes. You get older, you can get injured, you can have kids, a whole bunch of things change. And so, I've been watching a company just down the street doing landscaping and they're working on Sundays. They're working on Saturdays. We used to do the same thing. If your business is going to be in business long enough, that it's impossible to scale a large business doing that. I've yet to see a large business that works 7 days a week. It just doesn't exist. So, you will get the entrepreneurs, the mavericks out there who do that and they scramble and and that's fine. There's a place for them. If you want to create a scalable business, that is not the model. You got to figure out how to do it Monday to Friday, the odd Saturday if there's an emergency, and get your 50 hours of production in every single week, super efficient. And then you will have low turnover and you'll have predictable workflows, and things will run much better.
Yeah. Otherwise it's a terrible retention strategy.
Yeah. So you won't have retention. You're going to have, people leaving. And so, I've been in business 40 years. So I've seen, my first kid be born to one of our staff. I've seen, people retire. I've seen people die. There's one company, a larger company that I consult, and they started out actually from scratch and they've done really, really well. Like they're, well over 10 million in revenue now. And, what was interesting is, when they first started, I used to look at their payroll and I'm like, man, your payroll is so low. They were paying next to nothing. It was all 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds and 21-year-olds. Now when I look at their payroll and they've had people there for 15, 20 years, that payroll is way, way more expensive. The good news is they're more efficient and they make fewer mistakes. But that payroll, the dollars that you're paying everybody, it's just totally changed the percentage of revenue. So their early profits were made because of squeezing the life out of people. And it was also because they worked extra long hours, right? That's great for 5 years, maybe 10 years. That's not going to go 15 or 20 or 25 years. The only exception to that is if it's a family, a bunch of brothers or sisters who are just genetic mutants and don't know any different.
Warriors.
They are warriors, absolutely.
Yeah. And so for anyone who's hoping to have this turnkey transition, maybe they're established, fairly established as a business, but they want to free up their time. we've said a bit about what it's like in the beginning, with prioritizing and being patient. What that process is like. But after you start trying to create a turnkey business, there after like the spark, there's the journey through the desert. And what's that like? How do you keep pushing through the journey through the desert so that your team ends up being on board and so that your turnkey vision is actually executed properly?
So, one of the fortunate things I have is the ability to meet these amazing people who are like holding it together. And, there are companies that I meet that have enormous profits, and then they allocate the profits to the wrong person. They're trying to grow the business when they should be figuring out how to get the back end sorted out first, rather than trying to grow the front end. And so, if you've got money, you've got problems. If you don't have money, you've got problems. The difference is if you have money, you might make dumb decisions. And if you don't have money, you make no decisions. And so that's a clear distinction between the two situations I see people in. So I have to make the right move. What is it? Is it this or that? Because I can't afford both. And yes, you can leverage yourself to the nines. I see companies doing that. Very risky. Very, very risky. So, a little bit of debt is okay. But to literally go all hell bent on taking on debt to grow your business is not necessarily the best strategy, especially if it's negative cash flow. So there's a lot that goes into it. I think you have to know exactly what I'm supposed to do at this moment in time. What is my next chess move? And you might not be able to see it because you've never played chess before. That's literally what I do for a living now. And I built my business from, in 40 years to a turnkey business. Actually, we just bought a business last year as well. So we've integrated businesses. We've integrated a couple of businesses since we've been in business. And then I get to go help people fix their business. And so it's really, what is my next move? And sometimes it's a tactical move. Sometimes it's a strategic move. Sometimes you can do 2 or 3 moves at the same time, depending on what your bandwidth is, how deep your pockets are, and what your talent level is. And sometimes you have to wait because you can't do something and you find the right person. So, one of my favorite ones is, well, we tried that. It didn't work. Well, guess what? You got to try again. Just because you were unsuccessful once doesn't mean you can't try again. The question is what I'm supposed to be doing the correct next step? Yes or no? And then the only question is that person the right person or not? And, when you're hiring somebody, if you're not hiring for the long term, you're very short-sighted because that's a tactical decision. That'll hold me over. Holding me over is not a long-term strategy. So I don't like part-time. I don't like transient people. You can't build around that. And I think that's really important. So sometimes we settle for talent that doesn't fit or is going to get off our bus, at a couple stops. And although we got the benefit of them, we got to start again. So it's really about building long-term players that are franchise players. Then you've got something that you can really rely on.
Yeah, for each person that you're hiring, you're thinking about your culture and how they fit in the culture.
Yeah, and how much work they're going to do and whether I can predict that they're going to do that work continuously, right? So, I think it takes about 2 years to find out what someone's true character is. I've had people that impressed me for a year and then off a cliff. And so you really are hiring the family, to be honest with you. And if you don't have family support behind that employee, you're going to have a tough time. So it's a team. It's a village. And, the family is part of your tribe as well. You just may not realize that. So it's really important to have the spouses engaged and happy that you're working where you are.
Mm-hmm. And so you built this turnkey business and you have this culture that's great now. And so what was it like looking back after, all these steps towards the right direction, like actually being there? What was it like, kind of looking back from the other side, from the mountaintop?
Right. So I can't believe I survived that. I think we had 3, maybe 4 or 5 existential moments of near-death experiences on the journey. Were some of them avoidable? Maybe not. We survived them. So I think every business owner is going to have that moment of truth. Boldness and bravery to some degree, where we just took risks And, one of them was I decided to raise my price till no one hired me, and I was going to go out of business. I actually made a conscious choice to go out of business and still pay my bills, of course. And I didn't go to business. And that was like a big moment. Another big moment was, it was so frustrating with very difficult employees. And that's when I learned about Kaizen from a consultant back then. He's retired, called Jim Palouche. That was a game changer for me. We got lucky with some incredible staff, and we realized what a difference it made. And so we actually stopped growing probably about 10 years ago. And now we're on growth by acquisition. So we're buying companies to grow rather than trying to grow organically. It's just much easier. So that's our new growth path. We will buy another business again for sure. And so we learned a lot. We survived our mistakes, and it was hell, to be honest with you. It was absolute hell. And now that I know what I know, we would do things a lot differently for sure. We took on jobs in the commercial realm. We wouldn't get paid for a year. And I don't know what your life is like when you don't get paid for a year, but cash flow is tough. And so now you have to finance all the business operations in a highly capitalized business while you're trying to grow, while you don't have the money. So, for those companies that are doing design build and have it dialed in, it's much easier than the commercial world, for sure. The margins can be way higher, and you have more control. There are the issues, of course, but cash flow generally is not nearly as tough as in the commercial world. So we're doing, pretty much everything you can possibly imagine, from snow removal to, we did some maintenance. We still have maintenance, but it's more like horticultural maintenance now. And we did commercial construction. We did, bidding on projects. We did design build. It's amazing the experience we have. We've done, welding, whatever you could possibly imagine, waterfalls, all that stuff we've done. And the first time's always tough. So that's, you're getting into new business. If you're a newer business and you've never done something before, believe me, you're probably not going to make money on it. If you've got it dialed in and you do the same thing over and over and again, you know what you're doing, you're more likely to make money, that's for sure. So sometimes creativity kills, and that's where we came up with our trinity of design, which is price, creativity, buildability, and it has to be an equilateral triangle because you'll have designers design you out of profit. So, that's the first thing when we onboard a designer. This shape here, you have to respect it because you can't go ham on the design side and the price goes out of control and we don't land the work. So, creativity can kill for sure.
Mm-hmm. And for business owners looking to get to the next stage, maybe are there any final pieces of advice or final takeaways? Like if they had to get one thing from this episode, what is it that they should, focus on or remember?
Get help from someone who's been there and been through it and can tell you what not to do and what to do and when to do it. I think that's the biggest game changer. Be the best money you've ever spent. And somebody who's had their own business. So it can't be just somebody who's some consultant that hasn't run a business before. I think that's huge. And I think somebody that cares about people. So if you care about people, you can be ruthless in this process, and I've been, and I regret that. You can do this in a kind way. And I think for those of you that care about people, business and care can go together quite nicely, and it's just way more fun that way.
And as a last question, do you think that it's pretty uncommon to hear about turnkey businesses?
Oh my God, it's almost unheard of. Like a business that runs without you, it's almost unheard of in this industry. It really is, and I literally left my business and it ran without me. Like, that's kind of cool. And I knew it would, which is really cool. And so it is possible. You got to have those systems in place and you got to have practice having the business run without you. And it's ultimately what it's all about. So, it's funny because after 40 years, like, the fun of the day-to-day design and all that stuff, it does kind of wear on you a little bit. And so what's like the new horizon? Well, it's giving back, it's teaching, it's being part of your landscape association, it's traveling, it's spending time with your grandkids or your family or your dog, as the case may be in my world. And, at some point, like, are you going to work yourself to death? And so that's something Jim Palouche, this mentor of mine that we hired a couple times, he said, what's it going to take what's it going to say in your epitaph? He worked himself or she worked themselves to death. I don't know. That hit me like a brick in the face, no pun intended. And I realized that there's more to life than just work. So how do I make work the best it can be so it serves me? I could get a job. I could have made way more money, back in the day had I worked for somebody else, for sure. I had the talent. Building a business is another talent as well. And there is no school, unfortunately, for building a business. You have to do it. And the trick is to get the best people and the best advisors on the way at the right times. And I think, and people that are worried about your money, that don't want you to overspend. So if you shouldn't spend money on something, you don't do it, because it's so easy to blow money. Oh my. I think that's the biggest sin that I see is overspending. I think just the wrong, like even being cheap, that's also a type of overspending where you try to save money and it blows up in your face. So spend right, spend well, spend at the right time.
Yeah. It's interesting how there's this idea that is like coming to mind of the woman in the red dress, like as something that, you shouldn't be focusing on, but that's like a really shiny object that takes all your attention away, and then it takes you away from the things that like really matter. And it seems like a lot of the time talk about growth is like the woman in the red dress. And then when it comes to talk about like turnkey, which is, what actually is the most valuable thing, correct, it's ironically like people don't talk about it a lot.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like it's growth instead of turnkey. I'd love to switch that narrative. Actually, I'm going to do it right now. We're going to talk about a turnkey business that has a great balance sheet, healthy profits, happy people, and the business works for you. That is the recipe for success, not profits. I see people lose their shirts trying to be 10x their business and all this other bullshit. Sorry for the swears. Oh, it just drives me nuts. And yeah, you can get lucky for sure. People get lucky all the time. The chances are very, very slim to none, though, that happens in business. So unless you've got a product where I can sell 1 million widgets and I can turn the tap on and sell those widgets, if you're in the service people business and you actually have to hire people and make sure they don't quit, make sure they do a good job, and make sure there's no warranty, man, that is not easy to scale. There are easier businesses to scale, believe me, than landscaping. You've got pretty much everything going against you. You got the weather. You got people stealing your stuff. The stuff's expensive. You got lots of competition. You got people that don't know what they're doing and they underbid you. There is a litany of things going on in this business. And, you've got to be the best. Literally, you have to have all cylinders firing beautifully, and then your business is worth selling. Otherwise, you'll work yourself into a job, and you hear that over and over again, the cliche. You need to work yourself out of a job and have the business work for you. That's called turnkey.
Okay, George. Thank you.
Awesome.
That's a good place to end it.
Thanks, Ben.